Call security. The words cut through the marble lobby of Hamilton Trust Bank like a knife. Every head turned. Beneath the cold white light stood an elderly woman in a faded blue coat, clutching a canvas shopping bag against her chest. Rainwater dripped from the hem of her dress. Her gray hair was pinned loosely behind her head, and one of her shoes had been repaired with black tape. She looked terribly out of place among the polished floors, glass offices, and customers wearing expensive watches. Behind the counter, a young banker named Vanessa Cole leaned back in her chair with an impatient smile. "I only want to open an account," the old woman said. Her voice was quiet, but steady. Vanessa glanced at the worn bills in the woman's trembling hand. They were folded carefully and tied together with a piece of string. "With that?" Vanessa asked. A few employees laughed beneath their breath. The old woman looked down at the money. It was not much, $27 and some coins, but she held it as though it were something precious. "It's what I have today." Vanessa sighed and looked toward the security guard standing near the revolving doors. "This is a private financial institution, ma'am. We can't have people coming in here to warm themselves or ask for handouts." "I didn't ask for anything." The laughter stopped for a moment. Across the lobby, behind a glass wall, the branch manager, Richard Hale, was meeting with two wealthy investors. He noticed the disturbance but did not leave his leather chair. Instead, he watched with the detached expression of a man observing rain through a window. Vanessa slid the bills back across the counter. "There's a community center 3 blocks away. They might be able to help you." The elderly woman did not reach for the money. Her eyes moved slowly across the bank. They paused on the enormous portrait hanging above the lobby staircase, a stern-looking man in a dark suit, identified by a golden plaque as Arthur Hamilton, founder of Hamilton Trust. For just a second, something changed in her face. Not fear. Recognition. The security guard approached, though he seemed uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The woman finally picked up her money. Her hands shook as she placed it back inside her canvas bag. Then her fingers brushed against something hidden beneath an old book with a cracked green cover. Vanessa turned to another employee and smiled. "Some people really don't understand where they belong." The elderly woman heard her. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if holding back a memory far heavier than anger. Then she reached deep into the bag. When her hand emerged, she was holding a small velvet case, faded with age. A silver emblem was pressed into its surface, the same emblem carved into the marble walls of the bank. Richard Hale's smile vanished behind the glass. The woman opened the case just enough for Vanessa to see what was inside. The banker's face went pale. The security guard stopped moving. And the elderly woman whispered, "Perhaps you should call your chairman before you throw me out." Vanessa's hand froze above the keyboard. Inside the velvet case lay a tarnished brass key attached to a narrow silver tag. On one side was the emblem of Hamilton Trust. On the other were 4 words engraved by hand. "Founders Private Archive Access." Richard Hale pushed back his chair so quickly that it scraped against the glass wall. The two investors stopped speaking as he rushed into the lobby. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. The elderly woman closed the case. Her name was Evelyn Carter, though no one in the bank had bothered to ask. She had spent the previous night in a small apartment above a laundromat on the east side of the city. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained, and the radiator worked only when it wanted to. Most mornings, Evelyn woke before sunrise to clean offices downtown, moving quietly through rooms where people earned more in a day than she made in a month. She had not always been alone. Her husband, Samuel, had been a maintenance worker at Hamilton Trust nearly 40 years earlier. He fixed broken doors, carried heavy boxes, and stayed late whenever a pipe burst or an alarm failed. He never wore a suit, but he knew every hallway in the old bank better than most executives did. Samuel had died 7 years ago after a long illness. The medical bills took their savings first. Then the car. Then nearly everything else. All Evelyn had left was the apartment, the faded blue coat Samuel had bought her for their 20th anniversary, and the cracked green book she carried everywhere. It was an old copy of The Little Prince. Samuel used to read it aloud when they could not afford television. Between its pages, Evelyn kept a black and white photograph of him standing beside another man outside the original Hamilton Trust building. The other man was Arthur Hamilton, the bank's founder. Evelyn had never told anyone about the photograph. Nor had she explained why Arthur Hamilton himself had once given Samuel the brass key. She looked at Richard Hale with tired, steady eyes. "It belonged to my husband." Richard's expression hardened. "That key was reported missing decades ago." "No," Evelyn said. "It was entrusted." Vanessa folded her arms, trying to recover her confidence. "To a janitor?" Evelyn turned toward her. "To a man Mr. Hamilton trusted more than his board." The words settled over the lobby. Customers had stopped pretending not to listen. Even the investors stepped out of the office. Richard lowered his voice. "If this is some kind of fraud, the police will be involved." Evelyn did not argue. She simply opened her canvas bag again and removed the cracked green book. Its cover was soft from years of use. Its pages had yellowed at the edges. She held it with both hands, as though it contained the last living piece of someone she loved. "I came here because Samuel made me promise," she said. "Promise what?" Richard asked. Evelyn opened the book. A faded photograph slipped onto the marble floor, followed by a sealed envelope bearing Arthur Hamilton's signature. Richard stared down at it. Evelyn's voice trembled for the first time. To open that archive only when this bank forgot what it was built for. For several seconds, no one moved. The sealed envelope lay on the marble floor between Evelyn's taped shoe and Richard Hale's polished black loafer. Richard bent down and picked it up carefully. The paper was yellow with age, but the wax seal remained unbroken. Arthur Hamilton's initials were pressed into it with the same crest displayed throughout the bank. One of the investors stepped closer. "You recognize the signature?" Richard did. Everyone could see it in his face. But recognition was not the same as surrender. He straightened his tie and turned toward the growing crowd. Customers had begun whispering. A woman near the entrance was quietly recording the scene on her phone. Behind the counter, employees watched Vanessa as if waiting to see whether she would apologize. She did not. Instead, she looked at Evelyn's damp coat, worn bag, and trembling fingers. "Old paper can be copied," Vanessa said. "So can signatures." Evelyn lowered her eyes to the cracked green book still open in her hands. She did not defend herself. Richard carried the envelope toward the private offices, but Vanessa followed him. "If we let her continue," she whispered, though the lobby was quiet enough for everyone to hear, "we make the bank look foolish." Richard stopped. That was the thing he feared most. Not fraud. Not scandal. Humiliation. He turned back to Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter, we cannot open restricted records based on an object that may have been stolen." "My husband never stole anything." It was the sharpest sentence she had spoken, yet her voice remained calm. Richard's eyes hardened. Then perhaps he kept something that did not belong to him. The words struck Evelyn harder than Vanessa's laughter had. Her fingers tightened around the old book. For a moment, she was no longer standing beneath cold bank lights. She was beside Samuel's hospital bed, listening as he struggled to breathe, watching him press the velvet case into her palm. "They will call me a thief," he had warned her. "Do not fight them. Let the truth speak when they are finally quiet enough to hear it." Evelyn looked at Richard. "I will leave if you ask me to." Vanessa smiled with relief. "But first," Evelyn continued, "check the back of the founder's portrait." Richard glanced toward the staircase. The enormous portrait of Arthur Hamilton hung 15 feet above the floor. No one had moved it in years. The bank's security records showed no safe behind it, no access panel, no reason for Evelyn to mention it. Vanessa gave a short laugh. "This is becoming ridiculous." She signaled to the guard. This time, his expression was no longer gentle. He placed one hand near Evelyn's elbow, though he did not touch her. Richard held out the envelope. "Take this and go. If it is genuine, our legal department will contact you." Evelyn slowly shook her head. "That letter was not written for your lawyers." "Then who was it written for?" Before she could answer, the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened. A tall man with silver hair stepped out, accompanied by 3 board members and the bank's chief legal counsel. He had come for the investors' meeting, but the moment he saw the brass key in Evelyn's hand, all color drained from his face. He stared at her as though a ghost had walked into the building. "Stop," he said. The security guard stepped back. The man crossed the lobby, never taking his eyes off Evelyn. Then, in front of every employee and customer, the chairman of Hamilton Trust whispered, "Mrs. Carter, we've been searching for you for 30 years." The chairman's name was Thomas Hamilton, Arthur Hamilton's only grandson. He stood before Evelyn with his shoulders rigid, but his eyes were filled with something deeper than surprise. "Shame. My grandfather mentioned Samuel Carter in his final letters," Thomas said. "He said the future of this bank might one day depend on him." Richard Hale looked unsettled. "Mr. Hamilton, this woman could still be." "My grandfather did not trust easily," Thomas interrupted. "And he never used Samuel's name lightly." The lobby fell silent. Thomas asked Evelyn to follow him upstairs, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "It must happen here." Her gaze lifted toward Arthur Hamilton's portrait. For decades, executives had walked beneath it without really seeing it. They saw the founder's stern face, the expensive frame, and the authority it represented. Evelyn saw something else. A tiny scratch along the lower right corner. Samuel had described it to her many times. The mark left by his screwdriver on the night he helped Arthur Hamilton hide the archive. Thomas ordered 2 maintenance workers to bring a ladder. Richard protested, warning that the portrait was insured for a fortune, but no one listened to him now. When the frame was lifted from the wall, there was no visible safe behind it. Only smooth marble. Vanessa exhaled softly, almost smiling again. "There's nothing there." Evelyn stepped closer. Her old shoes made faint sounds against the polished floor. She reached into her canvas bag and removed the cracked green book. Then she opened it to a page Samuel had folded long ago. A simple drawing filled the margin, a small star above a narrow rectangle. To anyone else, it looked like the absent-minded sketch of a maintenance worker. But Evelyn placed her finger against a star carved into the marble border beside the portrait. She pressed it. Nothing happened. Richard gave an impatient sigh. Then Evelyn turned the brass key over and pressed the silver tag into a thin line beneath the carving, a line so perfectly hidden that generations of bankers had mistaken it for part of the stone. A quiet click echoed through the lobby. The marble panel shifted forward. The room seemed to stop breathing. Behind the wall was a narrow steel door with a keyhole darkened by age. Evelyn inserted the brass key. Her hand trembled. Not because she was afraid it would fail, but because Samuel should have been standing beside her. The lock turned. Inside the hidden chamber were shelves of ledgers, sealed documents, photographs, and an old wooden box bearing Arthur Hamilton's name. Thomas opened it. On top was a handwritten charter dated 42 years earlier. Beneath it were hundreds of account certificates belonging to janitors, cooks, drivers, factory workers, and widows, people the bank had once promised to serve through a private assistance fund. The fund was worth more than $80 million. Richard's face went white. Thomas read the final line of the charter aloud. "This fund shall remain under the protection of Samuel Carter and his chosen heir until Hamilton Trust again places dignity above wealth." Evelyn looked toward Vanessa. The young banker could no longer meet her eyes. Then Thomas found one final document beneath the charter. It named Evelyn Carter not only as the fund's legal guardian, but as the owner of the largest private voting share in Hamilton Trust. Vanessa gripped the edge of the counter. Richard stared at the document as if the ink might rearrange itself and save him. Thomas Hamilton read it twice. Then he lowered the paper and looked at Evelyn. My grandfather gave you control of the bank? Evelyn's eyes remained on the cracked green book in her hands. No, she said softly. He gave Samuel a choice. 42 years earlier, Samuel Carter had not been a trusted guardian or a man whose name appeared in private charters. He had been 26 years old, newly married, and working nights as a janitor in the original Hamilton Trust building. Arthur Hamilton had been powerful then, but not yet untouchable. One winter evening, a furnace pipe burst beneath the record's floor. Water rushed through the basement, threatening to destroy loan files belonging to hundreds of working families. Senior employees had already gone home. Samuel stayed. For 6 freezing hours, he carried boxes through waist-deep water, wrapped documents in plastic, and dragged them upstairs one by one. He saved mortgages, birth certificates, and the only proof many poor families had that their homes belonged to them. But that was not why Arthur trusted him. The next morning, Samuel found a leather folder beneath a collapsed shelf. Inside were bearer certificates worth more money than he could have earned in several lifetimes. No one had seen him find them. He could have taken one. Instead, he walked into Arthur Hamilton's office, soaked, exhausted, and shivering. You dropped something, Samuel had said. Arthur opened the folder and stared at him. Do you understand what this is worth? Samuel nodded. More than my name. That answer changed everything. Days later, Arthur learned that Samuel and Evelyn had been spending part of every paycheck buying groceries for families whose loans were being denied by the bank. They never asked for recognition. They simply left bags outside doors before sunrise. Arthur began meeting Samuel after hours. Together, they built a fund designed to protect people the bank considered too poor to matter. And the cracked green book became their private code book. The stars Samuel had drawn in its margins marked hidden records, protected accounts, and names of families who had received help. Arthur chose the book because Samuel carried it everywhere, reading it to Evelyn during lunch breaks and quiet nights. No executive would ever think to search a janitor's storybook. Thomas turned the old charter over. On the back, written in Arthur Hamilton's hand, was one final message. The guardian shall return when humiliation becomes policy and compassion becomes an inconvenience. Evelyn looked around the lobby. She had not come to seize a bank. She had come to test it. Over the previous 6 months, she had visited 12 Hamilton Trust branches wearing the same faded coat. At 11 of them, someone had offered her a chair, explained the account options, or treated her $27 with respect. This branch was the exception. Richard's voice cracked. So this was all a trap? Evelyn met his eyes. No. It was an opportunity. She closed the green book. You showed me who you were when you believed I had nothing. Thomas looked at Vanessa, then Richard, and finally at the employees who had remained silent. The truth in the hidden chamber had exposed more than forgotten money. It had revealed the exact moment a bank built to serve ordinary people had begun measuring human worth by clothing, shoes, and account balances. Evelyn placed the velvet case on the counter. Then she said the words that made the entire lobby hold its breath. Now I must decide whether this branch deserves to remain open. No one in the lobby dared to speak. Outside, rain slid down the tall glass windows, turning the city into a blur of gray lights. Inside, the cold marble room felt smaller than it had before, as though every polished surface had begun reflecting the truth no one wanted to face. Richard Hale removed his glasses. For the first time that morning, he did not look like a powerful branch manager. He looked like a frightened man standing in the ruins of his own choices. Mrs. Carter, he said, I failed this bank. Evelyn studied him quietly. You failed a person, she replied. The bank came second. Vanessa lowered her head. Her earlier smile was gone. Without confidence and cruelty to hide behind, she seemed much younger. I'm sorry, she whispered. Evelyn did not immediately forgive her. An apology spoken in front of a chairman was easy. The real test would come later, when another tired person entered carrying only a few dollars and no one important was watching. Thomas Hamilton asked the employees to gather in the lobby. Then, beside the open archive, he announced that Richard would be removed from his position pending a full review. Vanessa would not be fired immediately. Instead, Evelyn requested that she spend 6 months working with the bank's community outreach team, helping elderly customers, low-income families, and people opening their first accounts. "You're giving me another chance?" Vanessa asked. "I'm giving you a responsibility," Evelyn said. The Forgotten Assistance Fund was restored under Evelyn's supervision. Within weeks, it began helping families avoid eviction, supporting widows after medical emergencies, and giving small business loans to workers who had been rejected everywhere else. The branch did not close. It changed. The heavy private desks were removed from the center of the lobby and replaced with simple tables where customers could sit without feeling judged. Account minimums were lowered. Every employee received training built around one sentence from Arthur Hamilton's charter. Dignity must never require proof of wealth. Evelyn refused a luxurious office. Instead, she chose a small room near the entrance, where she could see everyone who walked through the doors. She still wore the faded blue coat. She still carried the canvas bag. And the cracked green book remained on her desk beside the old photograph of Samuel. Months later, a single mother entered the bank with 2 children and $17 folded inside an envelope. She paused near the door, embarrassed by her worn shoes. Vanessa saw her. For one dangerous second, the past seemed ready to repeat itself. Then Vanessa stood, brought the woman a chair, and knelt beside the children so they would not feel afraid. $17 is enough to begin, she said. From her office, Evelyn heard those words. She opened the green book and touched the photograph hidden between its pages. Samuel's face was faded, but his kindness had outlived him. Evelyn had entered the bank with $27. She left behind something worth far more than $80 million. She reminded an entire institution that character is revealed not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we treat those we believe can do nothing for us. And sometimes, the person standing before us in an old coat is not asking for charity. They are giving us one final chance to prove who we are. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment about a kindness you never forgot. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes dignity should belong to everyone.